So today we get a rebooted Persian Empire called the Safavid Empire. So what I want you to kind of think about as we go over the Safavids is imagine the Safavids as people who are sort of observing what the Ottomans did and what made the Ottomans successful, and they decide to copy a lot of it. But just like with much of Iranian history, or slash Persian history, what they copy, they basically make their own. They put a unique spin on it. So in this presentation, I'm going to be using the terms Safavid Empire, Iran, and Persia interchangeably. Just know that they basically mean all the same thing. So the Safavids originate from Turkish warrior elites that are sort of migrating after the Mongol invasions. This group practiced Shia Islam predominantly, and Shia Islam is spread by Safi al-Din. Remember that Safi al-Din is a Shia, but is also a Sufi mystic. Remember the Sufis were predominantly responsible for spreading Islam. Sufis tend to be very evangelical in a lot of respects. And so this converts a large quantity of the population of both Persia and Afghanistan to Islam. Now, the advantage there is that the Safavids have a core population that are very religiously motivated because of their new and kind of unique Shia identity. Because remember that Shia Islam still today constitutes a minority of Muslims throughout the Islamic world. On the other hand, by converting to Shia Islam, they indirectly make a lot of powerful enemies, mostly in the form of Sunni Muslim empires like the Ottomans and the Mughals. The founder of the Safavid Empire is considered to be Ismail, who has this absolutely amazing red beard. I'm not partial whatsoever. And Ismail is declared Shah or Emperor of the Safavid Empire. He names the empire after Safi al-Din, who is that Sufi mystic that we talked about, who basically helps make Iran or slash Persia Islamic. But, of course, this spells certain conflict with the Ottomans towards the west. So you have a war between the Safavids and the Ottomans, and this culminates with what is called the Battle of Calderon. The Battle of Calderon is an interesting mix of both the old world and the new. So on the one hand, you have traditional Persian cavalry called, I love this, Kitzelbash. Or as first period says, Kitzelbash. And they're going up against Ottoman janissaries who are armed, of course, with muskets and cannons. As you would imagine, things don't go too well for the Safavid forces. The Ottomans win, but the Ottomans aren't really able to achieve a knockout blow against the Safavids. So Shiism is blocked from westward advancement, but on the flip side, so too is Sunni Islam sort of blocked from an eastward advancement. One thing to kind of think about is that basically, neither side is really able to seriously threaten the other, partially because both Turkey, the heartland of the Ottoman Empire, and Persia are both extremely mountainous. And so this makes this terrain extremely easy to defend. And so you have wars sort of back and forth between the borders of both empires, but for the most part, the borders that are established between the Ottoman Empire and the Safavid Empire loosely correspond to the borders between Turkey and Iran today. Next leader to take note of is Abbas the Great, who rules from 1588 to 1629, and it's under Abbas and his epic mustache that the empire reaches the height of strength and prosperity. Basically, Abbas comes across an interesting and totally unique idea. What if foreign children are captured, educated, converted to Islam, and taught how to use firearms? These are going to be troops that are completely loyal to the Shah. Gee, I wonder where we've heard that before. So basically, Abbas creates the Dollar General Janissaries. Same idea. maybe it's a little different because these are Russians as opposed to Balkans who are primarily being conscripted and enslaved. Also, you have European advisors to help the Safavids on how to use firearms technology, but it's basically the same concept. The army is increased in size, but there really isn't much interest in a navy. Partially because, well, Iran doesn't have a huge sort of coastline. You have a few ports there, but really it's the other problem is, of course, that Iran is kind of totally surrounded by potentially hostile powers. You've got the Ottoman Empire on this side, you've got the Mughal Empire on the other side, and then you have perennially hostile semi-nomadic tribes from places like Afghanistan to the north. Maybe this strategic insecurity is one reason that the new capital founded by Abbas, called Isfahan, is established right smack dab in the middle of the country. Abbas also starts special building projects, including elaborate palaces and mosques. So we need to quickly review the basic differences between Shia and Sunni Islam. And basically those differences revolve around who gets to be caliph, or basically Islamic emperor. So in Sunni Islam, the idea is that essentially religious leaders can appoint the next caliph. That's why the first caliphate can be Arabic, but there's no real issue with the next caliphate or succeeding caliphates being Turkish, because ultimately it depends upon the consent of the religious leaders. On the other side, you have Shia Islam, and basically Shia Muslims believe that the caliph can only come from Muhammad's family, specifically through the descent of Muhammad's family member, Ali. So Safavid rulers claim to be descendants of Muhammad and Ali, which kind of stands to reason since they're all Shia. The Safavid court life was grand and the rulers were exalted. This is actually a continuity with Persian history even before the emergence of Islam. So if we remember the old Persian Achaemenid Empire, basically Persian emperors were also practically worshipped. Of course, they would not claim to worship the Shah, but the fact is that the Shah was especially exalted. The expansion of the Safavid Empire meant the expansion of Shi'ism, and if you look, for example, a lot of Iraq is occupied, and of course, this is an area of Iraq that is still predominantly Shia even to this day. And it's considered that defeating any Sunni Muslims, whether they're from the Ottoman Empire or the Mughal Empire, this was considered to be an act of faith. So Iranian society has always been extraordinarily complex. Iran has traditions of being both an extremely urban society and also a very rural and divided society. You can kind of think almost like ancient Greece in that respect, and for similar reasons, partially because of the very mountainous terrain. So if you're Shah, you have to try to balance power between your warriors, the Kitzelvash, your warrior nobility specifically, the imperial bureaucracy that reports directly to you, the religious clerics known as the mullahs, who might on the practical level be the most powerful individuals within towns and cities, and finally the Russian slave infantry that are supposed to compete with the royal nobility, or the warrior nobility for power. Merchants, artisans, and peasants comprise the rest of society. Iran does have a tradition of being very mercantile. It is on the Silk Road. But at this time period, most were engaged in farm labor and lived pretty rural lives. And again, similar to the Ottoman Empire, there's a very patriarchal society where women can exert influence over their husbands, especially royal women, but they would have no explicit power. The goal of making Isfahan a capital to rival Istanbul was also not fully realized because Istanbul is, of course, located on one of the most natural trade choke points in the world, whereas Isfahan is located inland away from a lot of the major trade routes. So, land-based trade was promoted, but it doesn't really take off like they sort of want and anticipate. So Isfahan doesn't really achieve its goal as being the Shia/Persian Constantinople. Originally, the Safavids used Turkish, but they switched to Persian after the Battle of Calderon. You mad, bro? So Persian is already the language of literature, or was already the language of literature during the Abbasid Empire, and that language, once again, becomes the language of literature in the Safavid Empire. So it becomes a language of poetry, fiction, drama, and history that are all written in Persian. One thing that you can't underestimate is basically the mullahs. The mullahs are officials that are educated in Islamic theology and law. They are used as mosque officials, prayer leaders, and they often serve as bureaucrats. So, very important thing here. Today, Islam, the Islamic Republic of Iran, is considered to be a government by and for a council of mullahs or religious leaders or religious jurists. So these mullahs are extremely important. And on a practical level, if you're looking at small communities and towns, the mullahs might be the most important officials there. So now that we have built the Safavids up, we are going to kill them off in the same lesson. Boo! So, the rapid demise of the Safavid Empire. By the way, as this notes, the collapse was very rapid. So, we've got Abbas the First, not to be confused with Abbas the Great, who fears assassination, and apparently fears assassination to such an extent that he removes all suitable heirs. And then, apparently, weak grandsons followed, which led to decline. Gee, I wonder why they would be weak. It's not like their formative memories revolve around the elimination of their parents at the hands of grandpa or something. So, gee, I have no idea. So anyway, you also have a combination of other factors. You have internal factional disputes, rebellions, and also you have the diverting of trade away from Iran and towards centers of trade visited by European traders, and this causes a gradual decline in the Safavid economy. This leads to this collapse of imperial administration, and in 1722, Isfahan itself falls to Afghani invaders. Nadir Khan Afshar, who has this little hat that looks like a rooster crest, invades northern Persia and declares himself Shah in 1736, but is unable to restore long-lasting authority, partially because he's seen to have very little legitimacy outside of Isfahan, and Iran, because it's so mountainous, is easy to disintegrate into different sort of provinces. Eventually, the ruling dynasty of Iran is going to be called the Qajar dynasty, Qajar, but that is a story for another time. Till then.